The chamber of the Galactic Council thrummed with the low hum of alien languages, a cacophony of tones and clicks blending into an otherworldly symphony. Seated at the heart of this towering amphitheater, Ambassador Jonathan Cain adjusted his ceremonial jacket, the insignia of Earth's fledgling membership gleaming on his chest. The human envoy was an island in a sea of hostile gazes, his calm demeanor masking the growing weight of unease pressing against him. He had been summoned under the pretext of addressing humanity's place in the Council, a tenuous position, hard-won after years of diplomacy. Yet the air in the chamber felt charged with something far darker. From the dais above, Supreme Chancellor Zycon loomed. His translucent skin shimmered under the chamber lights, the bioluminescent veins beneath his surface pulsing in time with his deliberate movements. Zycon raised a slender hand to silence the assembly, and the noise evaporated into a silence so profound it seemed to pull the oxygen from the room. Ambassador Cain, Zycon began, his voice a silken hiss. The Council convenes today to address grievous concerns regarding humanity's conduct. Cain rose, his sharp eyes sweeping across the assembly. He had faced opposition before. Humanity's rapid rise to interstellar prominence had unsettled many older civilizations, but this felt different. It wasn't just skepticism in their expressions. It was contempt. Supreme Chancellor, Cain began, his voice steady. If there are accusations against my people, I request that they be stated clearly. Humanity has abided by every agreement set forth by this council. We seek only cooperation and peace. A low murmur rippled through the assembly. Zycon allowed the noise to linger before speaking again, his smile revealing sharp, needle-like teeth. Peace, you say? Is it peace when your kind colonizes without regard for established territories? When your ships trespass into restricted sectors under the guise of exploration? Cain frowned, his mind racing. The accusations were fabrications, carefully designed to paint humanity as a threat. These claims are unfounded. Humanity has always acted in good faith. Enough! Zycon's voice thundered, amplified by the chamber's acoustics. The evidence speaks for itself. At his signal, holographic projections flared to life, casting an eerie glow across the chamber. The images displayed heavily edited footage of human ships in alien territories, doctored to appear aggressive. Cain's heart sank. The truth didn't matter here. This was theater, a carefully orchestrated attack on humanity's reputation. These fabrications are an insult to this council and to the principles it stands for, Cain said, his voice rising. If humanity is to be judged, let it be by facts, not lies. Zycon's smile widened, his victory evident. Judgment has already been passed, Ambassador. You are here not to debate, but to face the consequences of your species' transgressions. The chamber erupted into a frenzy of voices, some jeering, others murmuring in unease. Cain's pulse quickened as two hulking enforcers, their exoskeletons gleaming like obsidian, approached. He glanced toward the human delegation seated in a distant corner, their faces pale with horror. You can't do this, Cain said, his voice firm despite the panic clawing at his chest. This is an execution, not justice. Zycon tilted his head, feigning confusion. Execution? No, Ambassador. This is a demonstration, a message to your people that the Council will not tolerate insubordination. The enforcers seized Cain, their grip unyielding. He struggled, not out of hope for escape, but to maintain some semblance of dignity. As they dragged him toward a raised platform at the center of the chamber, the reality of his situation settled in. This wasn't just about him. It was a declaration of war in everything but name. The platform's restraints clamped around Cain's wrists and ankles, cold metal biting into his skin. He looked out at the assembly, at the hundreds of alien faces staring back. Some watched with cruel fascination, others with uneasy detachment. None spoke up. To all assembled, Zycon announced, his voice dripping with satisfaction, let this serve as a reminder of the price of defiance. A low hum began to emanate from the platform, growing in intensity. Cain closed his eyes, not in surrender, but in defiance of the spectacle they sought to make of him. His final thoughts weren't of fear, but of anger. Anger at the injustice, at the arrogance of those who believed they could extinguish humanity's flames so easily. The heat was sudden and all-consuming. Pain seared through his body, but he refused to scream. The chamber filled with the sound of the execution, the crackle of fire, and the low murmur of an audience too cowardly to look away. When it was over, the silence returned, heavier than before. All that remained of Ambassador Cain was a scorched outline on the platform. Zycon turned to the assembly, his tone triumphant. Let humanity witness what defiance brings. But far away, on a small blue planet, the message had already been received. The broadcast of Cain's death spread like wildfire, igniting something far more dangerous than fear. On Earth, Admiral Marcus Greaves stood in the war room of the Terran Defense Force, his jaw clenched as he watched the recording. "We gave them a chance," he said, his voice low but brimming with fury. "Now we show them who we are." The room erupted into motion as orders were barked and plans began to take shape. Humanity's grief was a fleeting thing, quickly replaced by a burning resolve. Cain's sacrifice would not be in vain. The galaxy had just made its gravest mistake. The war room was a storm of activity, its massive holographic displays casting a cold blue light over the assembled officers. Admiral Marcus Greaves stood at the center of it all, a pillar of grim determination. His piercing gaze swept across the gathered personnel, his presence commanding absolute silence despite the chaos erupting around him. In his mid-50s, with silver streaking his close-cropped hair, Greaves had spent a lifetime preparing for battles he had hoped would never come. Now, there was no avoiding it. The galaxy had forced humanity's hand. Ambassador Cain's death will not go unanswered, Greaves began, his voice a low rumble that carried authority. The Galactic Council believes they can extinguish us with fear. They underestimate what desperation can ignite. The officers nodded solemnly. Among them stood Commander Nathan Cole, a seasoned leader with a scar bisecting his right eyebrow, a souvenir from humanity's early skirmishes with pirates in the asteroid belts. Cole's reputation for unflinching bravery preceded him, but even he couldn't mask the tension tightening his jaw. Beside him was Captain Ethan Voss, a young but brilliant pilot known for his uncanny instincts in combat. Voss, with his tousled dark hair and a wry smirk that rarely left his face, was one of the few who seemed almost eager for the fight ahead. "Commander Cole," Greaves said, turning to him, "you'll lead the ground operations. I want plans in place for planetary sieges, infiltration missions, and surgical strikes on Council strongholds. We need their infrastructure crippled before they even realize we've struck." "Yes, sir," Cole replied, his tone clipped and professional. Beneath his calm exterior, he burned with the same fury that had ignited Earth. Cain's death wasn't just an attack on humanity. It was personal. "Captain Voss," Greaves continued, his gaze shifting to the younger officer, "you'll be leading our fighter squadrons. The Council's fleets outnumber us, but they're slow and reliant on outdated tactics. Speed and precision will be our advantage." Voss gave a sharp nod, his smirk fading for once. "I'll make sure they regret underestimating us, Admiral." Greaves turned back to the central hologram, which displayed a rotating image of the galaxy. Key Council territories were marked in red, each a potential target for humanity's retaliation. The strategy was ambitious, some might say reckless, but Greaves knew that caution wouldn't win this war. The Council had grown complacent in its dominance, and complacency was a weakness humanity intended to exploit. "Make no mistake," Greaves said, addressing the entire room. "This isn't just about vengeance. This is about survival. If we don't act decisively, they will finish what they started with Cain." The room erupted into a flurry of movement as officers rushed to relay orders and finalize plans. Greaves allowed himself a moment of stillness, his mind already racing ahead. Humanity had always thrived under pressure, and now, with its back against the wall, it would prove once again what it was capable of. In the training barracks of Earth's largest military installation, Soldiers prepared for the battles ahead. Rows of men and women stood in formation, their faces a mixture of determination and fear. Among them was Sergeant Darrell Briggs, a grizzled veteran who had seen more wars than he cared to count. Briggs was a man of few words, but his presence alone inspired respect. "Listen up," Briggs barked, pacing before the recruits. "The council thinks we're weak. They think we'll roll over and beg for mercy. Let me tell you something. They've never met us, and they sure as hell don't know what we're capable of." The recruits straightened, their resolve hardening under Briggs's fiery gaze. They had all seen the broadcast of Cain's death, and it had left an indelible mark. Each of them carried that memory like a flame, fueling their will to fight. Nearby, in the hangars, Voss inspected a squadron of fighter pilots. The sleek, angular ships gleamed under the harsh lights, their engines humming softly in anticipation. Voss ran a hand over the hull of his own fighter, a custom-built craft designed for speed and agility. It was his pride and joy, a symbol of the ingenuity that set humanity apart. "All right, listen up," Voss called out to his pilots, who gathered around him. "The Council's got bigger ships, better numbers, and more resources. But what they don't have is us. We're faster, smarter, and hungrier. And if they think they can scare us into submission, they're in for one hell of a surprise." His words were met with cheers, the sound echoing through the hangar. The pilots knew the odds, but they also knew that the best stories were born from impossible battles. Back in orbit, the Terran defense fleet mobilized. Massive dreadnoughts, bristling with weaponry, formed the backbone of the fleet, flanked by smaller cruisers and frigates. At the head of it all was Greaves's flagship, the Erebus, a leviathan of steel and firepower. On its bridge, Greaves stood beside Cole, their eyes fixed on a view screen displaying the fleet's movements. "This is it," Cole said quietly, "the beginning of something no one can take back." Greaves nodded, his expression unreadable. "We didn't start this, Nathan, but we'll damn well finish it." The first strikes were swift and precise. Human ships emerged from hyperspace like phantoms, targeting isolated Council outposts. The battles were brutal but brief, each victory a statement of intent. News of humanity's retaliation spread quickly, sowing fear and uncertainty among the Council's member species. In the Council chambers, Zyklon watched the reports with a mixture of anger and unease. Humanity's response had been far more organized and ferocious than he had anticipated. For the first time, doubt crept into his mind. Perhaps he had miscalculated. On Earth, Greaves convened with his top officers, a rare flicker of satisfaction crossing his face. The Council's fleets had been caught off guard, their complacency leaving them vulnerable. But Greaves knew this was only the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, in dismantling the Council's core power structures. As the meeting adjourned, Greaves lingered in the war room, staring at the holographic map. The galaxy was vast, its dangers countless, but he felt the weight of humanity's resolve pressing against his shoulders. They would fight, not just for vengeance, but for their right to exist. In his mind, he could almost hear Cain's voice, steady and unyielding. "We seek only cooperation and peace," Cain had said. The Council had mocked those words, but now they would learn what humanity's peace was made of. Greaves straightened, his gaze hardening. The Council had lit the fire. Now humanity would make sure it burned. The darkness of space came alive with fire and fury. The battle over Zoran Prime was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships streaked through the void like angry sparks, their sleek designs cutting through the cumbersome formations of the Galactic Council's fleet. Explosions blossomed against the black backdrop, lighting the battlefield with flashes of red and orange. Admiral Marcus Greaves stood on the bridge of the Erebus, his sharp eyes locked on the tactical display. Every move he made, every command he gave, carried the weight of humanity's survival. "Enemy dreadnoughts are regrouping near the fourth moon," a tactical officer reported, her voice tense but steady. Greaves leaned forward, his jaw tightening. "Deploy flanking units." Captain Voss and his squadrons will punch through their center. No hesitation, no mercy. The message was relayed instantly, and moments later, Captain Ethan Voss's voice crackled over the comms. "You heard the man, squad. Let's show them what we're made of." Voss grinned as he gripped the controls of his fighter, his heart pounding with adrenaline. Around him, his squadron fell into formation, their engines glowing like embers in the darkness. The Council's ships loomed ahead, massive and bristling with weapons, but their size was their weakness. Voss pushed the throttle forward, and his fighter shot ahead like an arrow, weaving through enemy fire with a precision that bordered on reckless. "Stick to the plan," Voss called out, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We're not here to play hero. Hit their command ships and get out." As Voss and his team broke through the Council's lines, Commander Nathan Cole led the ground assault below. Zoran Prime's surface was a hell's cape of smoke and fire, the Council's defenses crumbling under the relentless advance of human forces. Cole moved like a force of nature, his rifle cutting down enemies with ruthless efficiency. Around him, his soldiers fought with a ferocity born of desperation and rage. "Push forward," Cole shouted, his voice rising above the cacophony of battle. "We take that control center, or we die trying." The enemy fought back with a stubbornness that matched humanity's resolve. Alien soldiers, clad in intricate armor and wielding weapons powered by advanced technologies, met the human forces head-on. But for every human soldier that fell, two more seemed to rise, their determination unshakable. In the skies above, the tide of battle began to shift. The Council's fleets, disorganized and outmaneuvered, struggled to keep pace with humanity's aggressive tactics. On the bridge of the Erebus, Greaves watched as one of the enemy's dreadnoughts was engulfed in flames, its massive frame breaking apart under the weight of sustained firepower. "Another one down," his weapons officer reported, her tone laced with satisfaction. Greaves nodded, his expression unreadable. "Good, but we're not done yet. Focus fire on their flagship. Zycon is on that ship, and I want him eliminated." The Erebus shifted its position, its massive cannons swiveling to target the enemy's flagship. The ship in question was a monstrous thing, its dark hull bristling with weapons and shield generators. It had been the symbol of the Council's dominance for decades, but now it was a target no different from the rest. As the Erebus unleashed its fury, Voss's squadron darted between the larger ships, their smaller crafts exploiting every weakness in the enemy's formations. Voss's fighter shook as a near miss rocked his ship, but he didn't waver. "Stay focused," he barked, his eyes scanning for the next target. "We're not done until Greaves says we're done." On the ground, Cole and his team breached the control center, their victory within reach. But the cost had been high. Bodies littered the battlefield, both human and alien, a grim reminder of the stakes they faced. Cole wiped sweat and grime from his face as he barked orders, his voice hoarse but resolute. "Secure the area," he commanded, his rifle still at the ready. "This isn't over until we say it is." Back in space, the Council's flagship began to falter. Its shields flickered, unable to withstand the relentless assault. On board, Supreme Chancellor Zycon watched the battle unfold, his confidence crumbling with every passing moment. "They're overwhelming us," one of his advisors hissed, panic evident in their voice. Zycon bared his teeth, his translucent skin glowing faintly with rage. "They're nothing but savages," he spat. "They'll burn themselves out." But deep down he knew the truth. Humanity had proven itself far more resilient and far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The Erebus delivered the killing blow, its main cannon firing a beam of energy that tore through the flagship's core. The ship erupted in a massive explosion, the shockwave rippling across the battlefield. On the bridge of the Erebus, a hush fell as the crew watched the enemy's symbol of power disintegrate. "It's done," Greaves said quietly, his voice heavy with finality. As the battle ended, humanity's forces regrouped, their victory hard-earned and bittersweet. On Zoran Prime, Cole surveyed the aftermath, his heart heavy with the weight of what they had lost. Around him, soldiers tended to the wounded and collected the dead, their faces a mix of exhaustion and relief. Voss landed his fighter nearby, his usual smirk replaced by a somber expression. He approached Cole, his helmet tucked under his arm. "We did it," Voss said, his voice quiet. Cole nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Yeah, but at what cost?" Above them, the Terran fleet began to withdraw, their mission complete. On the Erebus, Greaves stood alone in the war room, staring at the holographic map. The Council's influence had been shattered, their power broken, but the scars of the war would linger. He thought of Cain, of the diplomat who had believed in peace until his final breath. "This is for you," Greaves muttered, his voice barely audible. Humanity had won, but the galaxy would never be the same. The Council's arrogance had been their downfall, and humanity had emerged from the fire stronger than ever. But as Greaves looked out into the vastness of space, he knew this was only the beginning. The war had ended, but the fight for humanity's place in the galaxy was far from over.